Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
This is Ed Cohen, and this is Global TV Talk Show. You know, we started Global TV Talk Show as a result of the pandemic shutting down our live conference business about 14 months ago or so, just after March 1st, 2020. And since then, Global TV has grown, thankfully. We've done almost 200 broadcasts, some better than others, but increasingly they're getting really good. And that's because of people like who we have on today. We have from Tehran, Iran, Mr. Peyman Dayyani. Hello, welcome again, sir.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to join again. It's a great place to be.
That's wonderful. It's exciting. And from Mexico City, Stephen Howard.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you very much. And I've got a little construction above my head, so if it's any background noise, let me know. But I'll join the session today.
If we start seeing cinders coming down on your bookcase, we'll jump out.
Thank you.
And Andrew, are you in Northwest Arkansas today?
I am indeed, and thank you so much for the invite, Ed. And it's a pleasure and honor to be here, especially with such esteemed folks, and including yourself, Ed.
Google Analytics has been measuring what we've been doing since '03 on globalbusinessnews.net, and with particularly a focus on Global TV Talk Show for the past 14 months or so. And as a result, according to Google Analytics, we've had about 100,000 page views because of this type of broadcast, and so we're really thankful. And Stephen, I want to throw this to you. Please do us the honor of explaining about your background. Let me just start by saying Stephen Howard and I have known each other about a year. He's been on the program many times in the role of author of, he's written 21 books, and he's working on another one. And they're all about business and leadership. And he has Caliente Leadership Consulting, which is a C-level approach to the brain and making it work, making right decisions. Stephen, you and I have agreed to go forward in this venture called Strive and Thrive. Why don't you do a deep dive for our global audience about Strive and Thrive?
Happy to, Ed, happy to. I think there's going to be two great shows, very appropriate for today's world. So today we're doing Strive XL, as we call it, and it's all about how leaders can strive to develop themselves, develop team members, strive to be the best leaders and the best humans possible. The other program is called Thrive XL, and in that show, we're going to focus on well-being in the workplace and what we can all do to reduce stress, anxiety, both in the work environment and in our personal lives. And for both shows, the XL, I mean, in honesty, when we first talked about this, we thought about Thrive X and Strive X, kind of like SpaceX and TEDx, but there was already a Thrive X somewhere out there. So we thought this XL is about living extra large, thriving, striving, going the extra mile, putting the extra effort. And so that's what this program is going to be all about. And so we want to have this one about Strive XL is developing oneself extra large and developing our people extra large. So I hope our audience enjoys the program.
Yeah, thank you. So the theme the structure going forward for Strive and Thrive is to alternate weeks. So every other week, we're going to do a broadcast, okay? So today is Strive, which is something that I thought of. Actually, there was this old family friend back in Boston, where I was from, who was just to give you an idea, a major investor in what's now called Target, okay? And like mega. So he had been advising me when I was like this big about what not to do more than what to do. But he said one of the things to do is to continue to strive. You'll be kicked around. People won't like your name. They won't like what you do. They won't like all kinds of things, and they're going to come at you. And so what you have to do is just strive. So he had this image in his office at the time, piece of art of this little guy, okay? And he was almost like, if you can imagine a poor person or a totally religious person on knees on the ground and striving up, as a symbol to the heavens, asking for help, striving. And he says, this is the key. You keep that in mind, and no matter what you do. So when I broached that topic to Stephen about the name of, how can we, everybody's doing leadership, so how do you make a dent in that? So I came up with this idea, and Stephen, thank you for liking the idea. and so now all this stuff is just as a result of two guys getting together. We didn't even have any wine. We just had a beer, I think, at a Mexican place. And the series has launched. We did one Strive and one Thrive, and here we are back in Strive. And so the idea was to talk about how companies and how leaders should be managing differently as a result of the COVID thing. Because my needs have changed, and your programs have changed, and thankfully they're working really well for you. And I'd like you to talk about that a little bit. Peyman, you're in a huge company called Solico. Peyman, Dayyani, why don't you tell us about what your role is in Solico and what is Solico?
Yeah, my role is I am a head of HR for Solico Group. Solico Group is a food industry company. It's a private, independent company. We are operating in Middle East and Africa, plus the GCC and CIS and Russia. We are in different part of the food industry, mainly dairy and chocolate and ready meal. These are our three main area, plus the beverages. These are our activities. We have over 14 plants all over Iran and Iraq, and we have 18,000 employees hired by the company, excluding the contractors around the country. And the founder is Mr. Ghulam Ali Soleimani. He's an entrepreneur. He built his empire by himself, and it's a very successful entrepreneur in Iran. And he's receiving various recognition from various associations, food industry, and in a number of the food exhibitions in Gulf food, in Russia, in Europe. And basically, we are very spread in this region. And I am in charge of the not only HR, but also transformation of the company to become operating as an international company, transformation of the culture, transformation of the HR policy and procedure, and in general, people management.
And what about the use of technology, Peyman? At one time you talked about finding ways to integrate.
Yeah, from 5-6 years back, the company has started to implement, because the company has spread all over this region, we start implementing the ERP system to enable the company have the real-time, dependable, accurate financial and production information ready on hand. In additional to that, there are a number of the systems and softwares are tied to this ERP system that will enable us to manage this huge operation. To give a bit of the sense of how big is this, we are receiving every day 3 million liters of the milk in our plant north of Iran, and we're producing that. It's a huge business, and distributing it through the whole Iran with the
we lost
fleet of the cold.
We just lost part of your voice. If you could just recap for about 30 seconds.
Yeah, as I said, to restate the size of the company, we are receiving 3 million liters of the milk per day, and we are distributing our products through a largest fleet of the cold chain trucks and transportation system throughout the whole region. That's mean Iran, Iraq, Russia, and CIS.
Interesting. Andrew, so tech could help, right?
Yes, I think definitely there's especially in the HR space, there's a big need for technology in order to kind of bridge these gaps of people leadership and how to connect people across cultures. I know, Ed, you're very familiar with what we're working with, and especially in what I think the contemporary term of diversity and inclusion has always historically been intercultural cohesion of learning, where Peyman, you're working, in all of these different countries. Obviously, in Africa, depending on which nation you're in, they will have very different cultures. They also have very, very differing cultures from, let's say, Russia. So being able to work with all these people, understand kind of the neurochemistry, culture, background that goes into our human interaction, and then using technology to help facilitate that, I think that's definitely how we get ahead of any people leadership challenges.
So Stephen, I don't mean to embarrass you, but this is one of your books. Why don't you explain what we're just hearing, how this relates to all of that? I just want to tie it together.
All right, thanks, Ed. I'm never embarrassed by that book. I'm proud of that book.
It's a big one. Look at all that.
It is, yeah. Not a lot of pages, a lot of research went into that. And that book talks about, in particularly management, one of the things I coach people on is to become first responders rather than first reactors. And, we're all 24/7, 7 days a week. We're under a lot of pressure, multicultural stuff. And it's, people react and make quick decisions. And I think particularly one thing that's coming out of the pandemic we're learning is that we're better off to pause, reflect, ask better questions of the people who bring us the problems or bring us the opportunities, and rather than say, okay, I'll make a snap decision and go with it, and then we have to course correct down the road. I think that's very, very important. So we have to learn, we have to train our leaders to pause, reflect, and I call them first responders, much like, a car accident, the fire trucks and ambulances, when they arrive on the scene, they don't jump out and run to the car crash. They pause, they look at it. Is there a fire? Is there electrical cables? Can they put themselves in harm? They respond. That's why they're called first responders. They don't react to that situation. That's what I'm encouraging leaders to do. But if I may, I'd like to ask Peyman a question, particularly here, because I know a lot of the ones I talk to, leaders I talk to, particularly in North America, which includes Canada and Mexico, they're very concerned about the millennials thinking of quitting their jobs or changing jobs after the pandemic, when we get back to work. I know a lot of millennials are upset that their companies stopped doing training when the pandemic hit. That was one of the first, the two budgets that always get hit in economic downtimes are advertising and training. So is that happening in your part of the world, Peyman? Are you concerned about that as head of HR, that you might lose a lot of people once you exit the lockdowns in your part of the world?
Sure, this is one of my daily challenge, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
Because two-thirds of our industry are made of the labor force, the blue collars employees.
Right.
And now we are hitting the new generation of blue collars. These new blue collars, they have a different mindset, different priorities, and the different opportunities which the previous generation, they never had it. These opportunities are enormous. For instance, one of these employees we have, he said, why I should come work in a production line while I can work on the internet taxi, like Uber, and I would make more money, and I have my own, I can manage my own timing. The work-life balance, which I call it work-life harmony, for them is a totally different meaning. And the other thing, they wanted to have a purpose for working rather than meeting end. Usually they are coming from the single child families, and their families are able to support them the way they were a child. And this is a company, this way of working in these cultures, especially in Middle East, it's the kids that stay with the family longer these days, and they don't want it to be independent. And they cannot, as a matter of fact, because of the economy and all that. But their work habits is totally different as our managers and leaders, because
they want to stay with their family, right? Multi-generational family, right?
Exactly, and that's the one of the main challenges we are facing, and we need to find out the way to move the production to more automated and autonomous way of production. It takes investment, and it takes time, obviously.
I think you've given me the title for not the next book, the book after, Work-Life Harmony. I love that. Andrew, are you seeing the same thing in the tech, in the IT field as well? Is people going to be moving after the pandemic? Closes, but slows down, so to speak?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I was smiling a lot during that because, a bit of background on me and what we do at Vendium is we are functionally an HR consultancy firm that really focuses in on two different pillars, and that is in the global mobility space and diversity and inclusion. Again, connecting people across cultures with both of those, and we facilitate that through AI and more specifically conversational AI. And thank you so much, producer Paul, for pulling that up. But the idea is of how we can. The reason why I was smiling is for those requirements of millennials and those expectations. And speaking from a millennial, so I'll pick on myself. looking at things like development. Development is very cheap to provide, and you can so you can facilitate that in essentially a self-paced manner. So that can always be an attractive thing to draw people there of, you know what, we spend a lot of time on development, and that time doesn't necessarily need to be in dollars per se. And another piece is how the leadership is setting the stage, especially during somewhat chaotic times. So right now, obviously, with the pandemic going on globally, the leader is the one that sets the culture, and they're the one that their role should essentially be what everyone is striving to be like. So kind of the, this may be antiquated at this point, but the first to arrive, last to leave, the person that will always charge into something. And I think when we look at things like personality tests, again, using technology to facilitate this, those personality tests will tell us what we revert to in times of stress. I know one of my best productive environment, for anyone that's familiar with the Berkman test, I'm a Berkman Red. So in times of high stress, I execute. So I also need, the Berkman Blue to be a planner for me. I need a green in order to be making sure that everyone's okay, because I'm just running at full speed in one direction and may not be thinking of the strategy. If the strategy is incorrect that I'm following, I need them to course correct me. But if the strategy is correct that I'm following, then I'm going to accomplish it before they're even done with the strategy. So I think it's the balance of those different personality types, different cultures, and then how we pull them together, and then the enticement that we use in order to support our new workforce.
Well, that's excellent. I love what you're doing on your website. Boy, it's really attractive.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So you've been busy. I don't mean to divulge any secrets or anything, but you've been busy the past few months, since January, I think, with a couple of major accounts. And so does this have to do with mobility or the implementation of tech into their mobility practices?
So a lot of our business, especially recently, has been in the diversity and inclusion space specifically.
I got it.
And that was an interesting revelation. So I'd say that, especially in my entrepreneurial journey with Vendium, a lot of it just kind of came out through osmosis. So originally, Vendium was designed as just a pure global mobility consulting firm, helping clients with development of policies and process and tools and things like that. And then when we realized the importance of the intercultural space, and then how that translated, especially with everything going on globally, politically, and socially and culturally right now, of where in the diversity and inclusion space, where we so often hear about diversity and inclusion topics as something divisive, as that there's one side versus the other side, and then people will butt heads. But rather than that, looking at it from the intercultural perspective, looking at it from the leadership perspective, the managerial perspective, ultimately, we want diverse talent because diverse talent brings innovation. And it's not just diversity of appearance, but it's diversity of thought. You need people with diverse skill sets in order to add value. But just because we are ancient hardware running very new software within our human brains, we need to make sure that the neurochemistry is being released in the proper way, that we're reacting not in our hunter-gatherer mindset, that we're reacting in our new software form, that we're able to make correct decisions, correct procedures, and tackle challenges as a group, and focus in on unity and cohesion. And again, I love the work-life harmony aspect of it too, where because all of it comes together, every piece of our culture, every piece of our daily life, that's what makes us us, and that's what also can cause conflict and friction in our working environments.
So Stephen, I want to bring in the strive and the thrive. This is a perfect fusion.
It absolutely is, and they're very interlinked concepts. And one of the key things that Andrew just talked about is, again, so many people think about diversity. They think about gender and race and maybe cross-cultural, but it's also the difference the way we think, the different way we operate. I mean, I'm a bit like Andrew. You know, when I'm focused on something, I'm rushing through it, particularly on a deadline, but I need somebody to make sure I'm not making mistakes. You need that diversity on a team. And I think that's one of the things I talk about in the book, the Better Decision, Better Thinking, Better Outcomes book you showed there, is that the importance of inclusion, introverts and extroverts. Sometimes the introverts have the greatest ideas, and yet so often they get ignored in a conference room setting or even on a Zoom call now because they don't speak up, and we don't benefit from their ideas.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
Okay, Peyman, managing crisis. Okay, how are you? You know, tomorrow morning, you know, your morning, you're going to be dealing with some kind of a crisis somewhere in the world, right? So how do you deal with all that?
I wanted to share with you one story. When I was studying in state back long time ago, I had a course that professor invite all the students to go to one survival camp to learn how to manage crisis and survive. And since he knew me and where I was coming from, and in the morning he said, "You don't need to come." I said, "Why?" He said, "You have been dealing with these circumstances too many times. You unbalance the class." And then he excluded me from the class. In this part of the world, for many years, the crisis become a part of the routine. And people are not prepare themselves for the crisis, but they face the crisis and they work it out with the crisis. It's a very different when you train people, prepare people, and make them competent to manage the crisis. It's more chaotic and more challenging when you want to learn by doing and not prepare for the extreme or the catastrophe crisis. I think this is a number one difference between this part of the world leadership and the rest of the, I think, the Western world, where the managers and the leader, through the simulation, through the training, they learn and they prepare themselves to pause and respond, as Stephen was mentioning. Here, it's like they threw you into the pool and you have to survive.
Yes.
And this is exactly, this is what we have been facing for many, many years, historically. But the acceleration of the crisis and the acceleration of the technology and the globalization, it has been fueled this crisis frequency. Now, the problem is many leaders, they cannot cope with the by heart or intuitively with the managing the crisis and catastrophe. That's the whole challenge for HR, to prepare them for worse, prepare them for managing the crisis, and put policy procedures and get them ready for unforeseen situation which would come next. That's, I think, what I meant by the crisis. For instance, this issue of the pandemic. 16 months ago, when right after the Iran hit the virus at a global level, and completely companies and the country were stunned, and they were not even prepared for such a circumstance. There were no protocol for anything. For instance, how to manage the pandemic this large, how to manage the workforce, how to manage it was everything, came to halt. And now after 16 months, 17 months, now still we are far from the advancement of the good, well-managed companies who have got ready themselves for this kind of pandemic when the SARS happened or other crises happened. Yeah. For instance, time to time I visit the different sites from the US, from Europe, and you see this OSHA for the health organization, the crisis management or public information. You see how well developed the policy, procedures, guideline, literature, everything, it's ready, and you just need to unzip it and apply it. Here, you have to start developing them from scratch. And that's, I think, that the big challenge we have faced on the crisis management is the content of the crisis management is very different in all ways, all the way with the way Western companies and international company manage the crisis.
So Peyman, teaching resilience is what we're talking about here, of whatever technique is used. Is it top down? Does it come from you? Does it come from the CEO? Or is it more bottom up, where the workers tell you what they need and then you respond? Or do you pave the way from the top and filter down how to think about tough times and how to be more personal resilient?
I think it's both ways, but more coming from the top down. From the top down, it's producing and feeding the best practices around the world, how the others managing this kind of situations, by translating, by educating, by teaching the people the concepts. But the problem is it's not the knowledge, it's the skills. The skills happen by doing, and that's the biggest challenge. The people here, they didn't have opportunity or the chance to practice this kind of situation in a school setting or in a laboratory setting or in a simulation setting. Therefore, it's become very difficult to learn and do the same time.
Okay.
It's like learning the swimming while you are learning how to swim. It's a very, very challenging.
Stephen, I've got to communicate back to
Okay.
Sandrine. Would you please take over for a second?
Sure, happy to. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Peyman. I know the only thing I would add to that, and then I'll ask Andrew to chime in here, is that leaders have to also walk the talk. I mean, a leader tries to teach resiliency, and that leader is the one who gets upset. Something goes wrong. They throw a phone across the wall, they slam the table, or whatever they happen to be doing. The leaders now in today's world have to show a lot more empathy and a lot more emotional intelligence, I would suggest, than just a few years ago. I mean, it has been on the upswing, but I think it's more important than ever. Andrew, as an entrepreneur, how are you tackling that? And how are you exhibiting resiliency and sharing resiliency with I don't know how big your staff is, but with your staff, your partners, or even your customers? How are you going about that?
Sure. And a small but mighty team of 6. So there is a, it was interesting when Peyman, you mentioned the survival camp. So one thing that I do that I always thought was very strange, so I'm glad to hear affirmation that other people do that as well, is I'll typically take new team members on a backpacking trip. So there you're going out into the forest, you're in what would be typically a scary scenario because there's no cell service, you're away from civilization, it could be a little bit dangerous. Maybe even go rappelling while we're there. So you're facing fears and then recognizing that it's not just, you can trust your team to the fullest extent. So I'd say first and foremost, again, I try to be the exact person that I would want to follow, and that we can more so rally the troops rather than be aggressive towards anyone. I know back in, my father was a solid mentor to me growing up. He was an entrepreneur as well, owned a commercial landscaping business, but it was much different of how you lead people that are doing, very blue collar manual labor rather than in a corporate environment. And that also was the antiquated, 1980s version of scream at someone until they do what you want, rather than, hey, let's identify the destination and let's talk about the steps to get there. I may not be thinking of the best step to get there because, again, Berkman read, I just want to go to the destination, forget all the steps. And so by recognizing that we can go to the destination via a different path, and that we can discuss the best way to get there, then we're all going towards the same goal, and then it creates the sense of stability. Because ultimately, what we're looking to do, in especially in times of crisis or uncertainty, is to create as strong of a foundation as possible. And the lack of communication, the lack of understanding of what's going on in our day-to-day interactions, I think is what causes a lot of disengagement and could increase our attrition. People can leave our organizations because they either feel like their voices weren't heard, or that they don't know where the team's going. So if you don't know where the team's going, that makes you feel like, again, the primal sense of, I'm in the middle of the forest and I don't know what to do here. I'm scared, fight or flight kicks in, and I'm running. So yeah, just communication, being the person that you want everyone else to try to strive to be. And then, so that takes a lot of, as a leader, holding yourself to account, that you need to be disciplined. You need to practice what you preach in all regards. And then also foster an environment of what I often refer to as tribe, where, again, I reference that a lot because I reference that hunter-gatherer mindset a lot, that the enemy is always outside the gate. We may have disagreements inside, but we're here towards the same goal. So if we're just discussing a different path, that's fine. And we can discuss those paths based on merit. And that way, if someone's idea isn't used, it's not a matter of it was a bad idea. It probably was a good idea, and it probably could be used for something else. But in that specific scenario, we can put that on the back burner for the next one. So yeah, it's just much more about building unity. And I think in a small organization, that's much easier than a large one. But ultimately, large organizations are built of small teams.
And I would suggest also, I mean, leaders need to express humility, and we're all humans. I mean, I'm sure that you make a mistake. You can now apologize to your team members and say, "Hey, my bad, so to speak. I made a mistake," and move on. Peyman, how are you managing or leading differently now than maybe 16 months ago? How are you leading your team differently?
I think the number one, it's the mindset is changed, especially with the senior leaders who were mostly from the generation X and Y. They were very much industrialist, and they were very much looked how to order people to get tasks done. Now, in past 16, 17 months, the priority for everyone has changed. Even for those people who were have long history of winning and success stories with managing people like industrialists. And now they realize the life can be very short. And the most important things is to live by purpose and have the empathy for everyone, and join the moment which we are together for passing through this river together. This is, I think, the most change of mindset in many of the managers I see around my company, and they are realizing, despite of the challenges of the economy challenges of the getting things done, and the different clash of different generation together, but the one point is to have a mindfulness about the realities of today circumstances, that things cannot be as usual, cannot be as yesterday, and tomorrow we don't know what new things would happen. For instance, in few months back, things that were coming to settled, and things were looks more brighter. Now, all of a sudden, in past month or so, now with the pandemic, with the new viruses, a new version of these viruses hit the country, they realize nothing is stable anymore, and things can change rapidly without any notice. And we need to prepare and to get ourselves equipped with the new skills, with the new competences to manage this VUCA world in a different way. In addition, I think we discussed about this, and I think Andrew can comment on that. The business changes itself with the digitalization, with the new way of working, and change of the business models. Now, the two things together makes it more challenging and more interesting to look forward to the new world of 21st century.
Andrew?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think that that's a brilliant point. I think that technology can either work to our advantage or disadvantage, depending on how we use it. So we've seen a lot of information, a lot of studies about how technology can distract us and pull us away from whatever we're doing. But in the same regard, through things like game theory, of knowing that people enjoy doing stuff that feels productive. And if you have that neurological response based upon a video game, then how do we create that in our working environments? So a technique that we use a lot is through conversational AI that can be fun. You can turn it into a game. You can have like even something it sounds silly, but when you log in to your computer in the morning in a corporate environment, and a chatbot will pop up and ask you, how are you feeling today? And before you log out, you need to click how you're feeling at the end of the day. It's just a quick little poll survey. Then you can track that. And depending on how often you want to do it, you can measure their engagement. And especially if you keep that anonymous, then people aren't afraid of what could happen to them afterwards. And then you get some really solid data that you can make actionable. And a big piece too is making sure, we talked about the development of our people, making sure that they have the skills in order to interact well with one another, and that there's a way that we can measure it. Because if we can measure it, then we can improve upon it, and then we know where our base point is. Because ultimately, if we're just looking to push our people and say, hey, you all get along well, and even if we can try to practice what we preach and be the figure that we want our folks to be like, but there could always be something behind the scenes, some kind of noise that acts as a barrier between us. And I think a big piece of the noise that has been frustrating for me is, especially over the past year, has been what we hear about on the news, where different countries are in conflict, but recognizing that it's not conflict between people, it's between governments. It's because of a certain thing that occurred. We hear so much about racial conflict. I actually have a video that I'm going to be releasing here soon, where I'm doing a talk about some of the racial conflict in the US and how that's impacting our business. So I live in Arkansas, which in the US, there's a city in Arkansas that's heralded as the most racist city in the United States. And obviously that is a very detrimental title. But in speaking just anecdotally on it, I can say in having been there a number of times, I live about an hour and a half from there. It shows how far we've come. But if we just listen in to all the messaging that we're hearing, if we just listen into the confirmation bias that comes into play in our social media and in news media and everything that we are just bombarded with every single day, then we can then look at our coworkers as a potential threat or potential issue. We look at people that in a certain position, and are they a diversity hire, or did they get there off of merit? And that type of stability or instability should never be in the workplace. If anyone's there, you should know that they're there off of merit. If anyone is on your team, you should know that they have your back and they're going to have your back through anything. And it's the leader that needs to hold even those behaviors and skills to account with their team members, to make sure that it actually is measured and sustained over time.
I want to add another layer. Okay, if we can step aside for a moment, and prayer, the use of that in communicating with the workforce. And so the virus, particularly as what we're seeing now in India and perhaps Iran, I haven't heard anything other than what you've just said, Peyman, but it must be in the air. It's almost like biblical in nature of what's going on with the variants and ripping through societies, and that there's a higher power somehow at work. Doesn't matter who or what religion is just out there. And some people are just sitting around in their house waiting to get sick, I guess, and they're fearing that, never mind in the workplace. So is it instructive, Peyman? Is it useful? And you could redirect if you think this is off the wall too much, but is it appropriate for a business leader like yourself to bring together the idea within the work population a way of being more resilient by praying for a higher advice at this crazy time, and then integrating that into the workplace somehow?
I'll be honest with you. I mean, the first it would strike us with this view, but you have to need to put it into the context. In Iran, for 40 years, the government has been a religious government, and we see the exact opposite. Now, people are more relying on science rather than pray. It's a very scary, from my point of view, that the people are showing resilience towards religion, towards prayer and the faith. And they say, dealing with this crisis require more scientific, more educational, more technical approach rather than going to more mysterious, more religious, more faith to manage. And personally, I feel very scary, because when these things collapse in the mentality of the people, it's very difficult to build on it again, because people, when they lose the faith and believe in some more powerful belief or more powerful forces, then they lose hope. And that's from my point of view, that's very, very scary these days in general public, and especially I see it in the company as well. People today, they are pushing and demanding government and company to supply vaccine, supply more health support, and to get over this crisis rather than going to pray. I mean, we are in the mid of the Ramadan, and I see people are not really respecting it anymore. In general, in the past years, I mean, when I was younger, during the time of the breaking the fast, you would see a drop of traffic in all roads. Now you don't see any drop on traffic on the roads, and the people still driving around. And the other thing which now accelerate this lose of the spirituality, because the mosques are closed, all the church are closed, all the knisas are closed, and there is no spiritual practices anymore. And that's very, very scary, as a matter of fact.
Thank you so much for this explanation, Stephen. Can you bring this together and take us to another level?
Well, we could do a whole show on crisis of leadership. I would argue and advocate that church, religion are organizations, and between the pedophilia scandals in the Catholic Church to the born again Christian preachers with their $20 million luxury jets and whatever. I've seen I think it's called Hillsong Church has had 2 scandals just in the last 3 weeks. The leaders of these organizations are not walking the talk in many regards, and in the United States, I read recently that people identifying with religion is now less than 50% of the population. So I think it is a crisis of leadership. And the number of churches and church leaders who got involved in the 2020 election, and which is their right to free speech in some respects, but in other respects, supporting the idea that the election was stolen. You're entitled to your opinion, I'm entitled to mine, whatever, but that is just leading to people losing trust in these organizations, as Peyman was saying. And I think it is a crisis of leadership.
Yeah, Andrew, can tech solve the problem?
Yeah, it's interesting. I just actually recently did a talk at a high school about artificial intelligence. And one topic that came up there was, so specifically as AI increases in power, then ultimately there needs to be some form of moral compass that is programmed into it. And many of us have gotten our moral compass from religion. I mean, if you look at it historically, then you're either going from some kind of religious basis, or potentially the ancient Greek form of morality that was, I believe Aristotle said, it wasn't if it's right or wrong, but is it worthy? And if we understand that in times of crisis, regardless of any religion or any foundational piece of it, that we need to have very, very strong ethics. We need to have very, very strong morals, and we need to understand that we are part of something bigger than ourselves that is always there to support us. So it's much more difficult to create that from a leadership perspective, but it is possible, of where they're not necessarily praying to a higher power, but it's having faith that the structure is there to cover you. So I mentioned before that I like to go rappelling. I am absolutely terrified of heights. I'm probably one of the most one of the highest phobias of heights of anyone that you'll ever meet. And I face that fear by rappelling, because ultimately I build out the structure that I need to make sure that I have a solid anchor in place. I need to put my gear on appropriately. I need to make sure that everything is done correctly. Otherwise, I fall off a cliff. Well, it literally turns into a life or death scenario in order to have faith in the process. Now, that's an extreme example. I don't recommend that everyone goes out and tries to self-teach themselves how to jump off of a cliff. But it's important to know that we can trust that. And the way that we can use tech is through things like checking in on our people. Another tool that we've been using that we've had a lot of success with is with professional profiles, where it's not just, like a LinkedIn where you're saying these are your professional skills. It will have professional skills, it will have professional experience, but then things like hobbies and what you enjoy. Because if you are listing the hobbies and what you enjoy, then you have a way that people can bond off of it. Of like, someone happens to like a certain type of food. Now your team members can go out together and bond over that. They may be from different cultures, they may be from different backgrounds, but they use that technology to find out something very human about the person. And I often talk about how technology is there as a human augmentation. It's there to support us. It's there to make us better. It's a extension of us. We all have our phones essentially attached to us at all times. It's within arm's reach, even when we're sleeping. And that phone has access to the internet, which is the culmination of all human knowledge. It's fantastic. We have the Library of Alexandria in our pocket. But how we use that is what matters. And making sure that, again, those strong ethics and morals, kind of any of the core values of the organization, that they're adhered to a very strong degree. Then we know that we have, again, the foundation to then build upon things. And that strong foundation means that no matter what, we have that net. We're never going below this point. So take risks and look to grow your career as much as possible, because the worst that you'll fall is right down here, and then you can just hop right back up again.
So my scared to death thing is starting a new business. Let me tell you, it's frightful. Peyman, I've loved this conversation with you, and thank you. I've learned from you again.
No, I'm learning. Well,
please come back again.
Sure, I will.
Stephen Howard and I are going to be doing this now through Christmas.
Very good job. Very good job.
Our goal has been to create engaging conversations, and I certainly believe we accomplished that today.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Peyman, Ramadan Mubarak. Did I say that correctly?
Thank you very much. Yes, very correct.
Okay, perfect.
That's nice. Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, great. All right. Well, let's end this while we're still smiling. And thank you, Stephen, for being there.
Yeah, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us.
Yeah,
Thank you. It was a pleasure to meeting you guys.
Thank you, producer
Thank you.
Paul, for doing all this. And Andrew, please come back.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Okay, this is Ed in San Diego, and that's Stephen in Mexico City, Peyman in Tehran, Andrew in Northwest Arkansas. It's quite diverse. Okay, adios, amigos.
Adios.
Adios.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.